throughout my career as a designer and educator, I've found that my colleagues and I are constantly getting up to speed quite quickly with each new project that comes into IDEO, or even when I was teaching. So that's a testament to the need to continue to learn as you move forward past life here at Furman. I've come to value 3 essential elements to lifelong learning that I thought I'd touch on briefly tonight, and others have as well. And when you take these in sum, add them up, they lead to infinite possibilities. And I believe firmly that any future design solutions that we come up with need to both reinforce and be sustained by these essential elements for lifelong learning. So let's take a look at this first one, which has been, again, spoken to quite well today, throughout the day. Curiosity. Curiosity demonstrates interest with humility. It can't be prescribed. It's different in all of us, and it's inherently optimistic. And it's this optimism that's key to any learning experience that we want to engage in. I see a lot of that here on campus, which is great. When I think back to early curiosity influences in my life, they're all inherently optimistic. Things like the moonshot and Moonraker and the permission to dream come to mind for me. I can remember sitting around a television that looked more like a piece of furniture than a TV with my family, looking at grainy black and white televised images of the splashdowns, and that act of the family coming together sent a powerful signal that big and important things can and do happen in the world. And indeed they were. During this unprecedented moonshot era, America collectively took an optimistic leap of faith, and we worked together in an interdisciplinary way to accomplish seemingly unachievable goals. And it's my hope that taking this energy from the room tonight, we can continue to harness that optimistic curiosity and do some great things together, just as we did looking back at our past. I've also, in later years, come to marvel at the sheer complexity of what was achieved during the age of slide rules. And in contrast to that complexity, I recall some very simple role models that shaped my early years. And a great embodiment of that optimism and can-do attitude was conveyed through a character, Major Matt Mason. For those of you that may not be familiar with Mattel's offering, 1966 was an important year for my brother and I. Mattel released Major Matt Mason, Sergeant Spark, and civilian astronaut Doug Davis, and Lieutenant Jeff Long into our lives. And what's interesting to note is the year of release. It was 1966. As a result, we hadn't landed on the moon yet. So all this was based on curious speculation as to how we were going to be getting around on the surface of the moon, and based on articles in Jane's Aviation and embodied in magazines like the Cover Life magazine here. I'm sure Neil Armstrong was happy they didn't go this direction. But despite that ambiguity, Mattel, again, I'm very grateful they had the curiosity and optimism to put something out into the world. And by doing so, they inspired a new generation of space exploration enthusiasts and my older brother and I. And then if you look at this pre-visualization imagery that's come out to, just in the last couple of weeks I've discovered this, it looks like Major Matt Mason is actually being considered as content for a new feature-length film, which is positioning it again to inspire a new generation of potential actual space explorers. So the point here is that the persistence and power of dreaming spans generations, and I hope we can do a bit of dreaming as we're taking on the hard work of redesigning for higher education as well. So with that, we might ask, what's today's equivalent for a moonshot in education? And how might our optimistic curiosity provide a new generation with inspiration and worthy goals to strive for? But just as important as dreaming is doing. And this is a great sign of doing. This is Dabble. It's a service that's actually redefining where the classroom is, who is an actual teacher at any given time. It's a great startup that we had the pleasure of working with at IDEO last fall. And like Mattel, even though they're not quite sure how this notion of face-to-face learning and online learning is going to shake out and balance out, they've admirably taken this optimistic leap of faith and they put something out into the world that we can respond to, and they can become part of the prototyping mix as we move forward. Now, despite efforts like this that are terribly inspiring, nations are still struggling with prioritizing higher education and education at all levels, frankly. So we might ask, how can our optimistic curiosity help shift priorities towards education? It's great to see the energy tonight, but I think we can all agree at a larger scale, we need to focus some more light on this. Now, in the past, we've seen great societal shifts with campaigns stressing that we can do this, and we're in this together, and we need to sacrifice a little bit, right? But how might we affect active change and prioritize education in today's age is an interesting question. When I was 10, some of you may have seen this film, Star Wars. It had a big influence on my life. I saw it 6 or 7 times, which I think is a trivial amount when you compare it to young girls that saw the Titanic movie, apparently. But during that time, it was a real phenomenon and shaped my life. And ever since then, I've wondered, with the persistence of the story and the way in which it was conveyed, how might we make educational content equally fascinating and engaging? Can you imagine people going back to a history course 6 or 7 times and analyzing all the details of what was shared during a lecture, for example? And just 2 years later, Moonraker came along, and this matter-of-fact portrayal of space travel, it left a different type of impression on me, rather than the spectacle of Star Wars and something happening in a galaxy far, far away. We were soon to be traveling in space, complete with villains and beautiful ladies, in the here and now, right? So I think that was another influential point in my life, and those things have stuck with me over the years. And perhaps rather than campaigns with posters beseeching us to sacrifice, I've kind of struck upon this notion of leveraging something referred to by others as science faction to possibly convey and illuminate our path forward as we redesign the future of education. So science faction is actually speculative or technological advancements and inventions that were once referred in science fiction that have since actually transpired to become true. So with that, a few exemplars are some of the best future work, like this space station in 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is actually spinning to create artificial gravity. This kind of work is done based on known constraints, making it much more plausible and believable. This kind of work also shows a path to how it might come into being. Here you can see in the background that there's a partner in play with Hilton. So there's some underlying business models to the best-in-class science faction work that's out there. There's some risk in doing this, and Pan America is no longer with us, but it does show how a partnership path might allow some of this to happen. And in fact, that vision from 50 years ago, if you change a logo and maybe a few features to the spacecraft, it's not that far off from what Sir Richard Branson has in mind with the Virgin Galactic offering. So with that, we might ask, how might our curiosity lead us to new models for education that are both fantastic and attainable? Star Wars and Moonraker. And with that balance, that leads to another early curiosity influencer in my life, visual futurist Sid Mead. When I was a boy, I spent hours and hours poring over the details of his spacecraft visualizations, and regardless of how you feel about science fiction, like great architecture, this is an amazing balance of both detail and design integrity in totality. And I think if we can get inspired by this kind of work and apply it to our future educational design, we'd be a lot better off. So many times we get lost in the details, or our systems that we're designing aren't really compatible and they don't come together. Another thing that struck me in my early years was Mead's ability to think at scale. This is another visualization of an amazing orbital platform, and it's always had me thinking, what happens if we think both optimistically and monumentally about alternatives and options as we're designing? And if we think both optimistically and monumentally in terms of redesigning education, where might that lead us? Another thing that strikes me about Mead's work is that he's balancing both human needs and system level needs. And you can see here in this personal transportation pod concept that people are getting around quite well, sheltered from the weather. They look like they're getting exercise some time of the day. I don't know when, but if we fast forward about 30 years, this is the offerings that are out on the market today from Segway. So this is a case in point that proves that if we do design based on compelling human needs and system needs, technology has a way of catching up with our vision work. And with that, I'd ask us to think about what kind of vision work should we be doing in designing and redesigning education. And it's been great seeing some of that already happening throughout the day today. There's other design segments out there in the world that we can draw on for inspiration. If you look at the automotive industry, they're doing this continually with concept cars annually that create a vision pull effect. We may not have flying cars yet as envisioned here by Mead for a film Blade Runner, but lo and behold, a lot of his design motifs are actually coming into being now. And this is driven by sound reasons like aerodynamic efficiency, material sciences, environmental, and social impact issues. So another case in point is Mead's attention again to both human needs and system level constraints in terms of here there's aerodynamics represented and kind of a timeless human need for or desire for luxury. And if we fast forward 30 years, today Cadillac's exploring an art and design language, or art and science language, I should say, that whether you like it or not, does reflect a lot of the design motifs that Mead was working with some 30 years ago. So what this tells us is that curious and optimistic vision work not only helps us shape the future, but it gives us a preview of what's to come. And as a result, we have an opportunity to pull some handles and shape that future together. So seeing Mead's work, I think it's all worthwhile to ask and to note, actually, that there's a lot of great work of that caliber that's happening in redesigning education today. Sir Ken Robinson and others are doing fantastic things, as well as many of you here tonight. But we should ask ourselves, how can we support individuals that are the equivalent of Lucas and Mead as they're doing visionary work in redesigning education? And as a complement to celebrating and supporting individuals, one of today's curiosity influencers for me is leveraging diversity and cross-pollination. I'm fortunate enough to work at a company like IDEO, where on any given project we're leveraging and cross-pollinating from colleagues from this diverse range of skills. And after all, it took 400,000 people to get us to the moon and back, all sharing different skills, perspectives, and ideas, and that kind of thing is core to the liberal arts experience and should continue in some way as we move forward. The other thing that we benefit from at IDEO is we have a global base of clients from various countries around the world that are constantly coming in and feeding our curiosity and allowing us to make cross connections in interesting ways. So how might we come upon this level of diversity as we're designing new models for education comes to mind? Which leads me to the second essential element for lifelong learning, which is empathy. Many of you have talked about this tonight. If we take a closer look at it, in my view, empathy opens the mind and heart, providing permission to apply one's passion with curiosity. I had the good fortune to grow up in a land of contrasts, just a couple hours from here. This is the beautiful Furman campus. I spent a lot of time running on this golf course my freshman year, dodging golf balls. But just a little over 2 hours away, there's another beautiful community, university community nestled in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, Cullowhee, and it's here where I really started to understand how do you bridge across those that were having a university experience and those that were not, and dealing with relevancy issues and empathizing. So during my early years, I struggled with the beauty of the Smoky Mountains and some of the harsh realities of what many encounter growing up and trying to make ends meet in this unique part of the world. And with that, I actually entered the gates of Furman and was very pleased to note in retrospect that my empathy grew through interdisciplinary studies, as well as, and moreover, by the way in which those studies were conveyed here at Furman. I really appreciated the value of multi-mediated experiences, and as we do take advantage of new technologies, not only for distance learning, I'm hoping we can push the edge and get some of that fascination that we're experiencing in films like Star Wars and other things into the core experience through a multi-mediated way of teaching. I had Dr. Spears for what could have been a dire and dismal 8 a.m. freshman Western Civ course here after we put 5 miles in going around the golf course at 6 in the morning, and he really brought history to life. He'd bring in music from different periods. He brought in art and artifacts, really making the times tangible. And as a result, we then got to the events that we really needed to understand the significance of, and since we could empathize with the people that were experiencing the events at the time, it's much easier to not only memorize events, but really internalize them. Today we see people like John Hunter doing amazing things with his World Peace game with 4th graders, I believe it is, or maybe it's 6th graders, but it's very inspiring to see the kids rising to the occasion of basically playing out the roles of today's UN and succeeding to collaborate together. If you haven't seen John's work, I'd encourage you to check out his TED Talk. But I find that terribly inspiring, as well as other ways in which today we're leveraging the power of collective creativity. We see amazing things happening on Open IDEO challenges that are put out into the world to do social good. Folks coming, participating, suggesting ideas, going through the design thinking process online. and reaching solutions to some tough problems. And this is fantastic to see this level of participation. But online experiences actually require more than just participation. This is a short piece that we recently completed for the Innovators Accelerator content, and I'll just let this run just very briefly. So this was mentioned earlier today. Online learning environments like this need to provide opportunities for folks to practice new skills, not just learn about them and discover them. And they need to encourage exploration, achievement, collaboration, and customization. So we're attempting to do all that in that environment. So with that, we might ask ourselves, how might we design collaboratively with those whom future education offerings are actually intended? And that leads to the last essential element for lifelong learning in my mind, which is passion. Passion grows from discovering one's own innate talent and the positive reinforcement of it. Early passion influences for me involve small gestures and the right tools at the right time. When I was 8, my parents bought me a Mickey Mouse Club light-up drawing desk. And this was the first time I saw the word design associated with any creative activity that I was doing. And it was great to have that sense of pride associated with something that I was doing that I really enjoyed, and it was creative. Today's equivalent might be something like Tinkercad. This is a highly accessible 3D environment aimed at kids. And if you couple this with today's latest innovations in terms of 3D printing, we're really got some great tools out there to inspire the next generation of designers and artists to do incredible things. So with that, we might ask, how might we better align students' passions and skills with tools in ways that lead to natural rigor and fulfillment? And perhaps we also owe it to ourselves to give ourselves the space to be creative, which is another one of today's passion influencers at IDEO. We're constantly carving out time to do things outside of our consulting work. This is some work that we did called Designs On. This happened to be some work around the theme of food. We've done one on time and one on birth, and it just lets the designers put things out into the world like popsicles that are good for your teeth, probiotic yogurt that once it's done you can clean your teeth with the stick. So interesting to have that space to play in. So with that, we might ask one more question, which is, how might we give ourselves the creative space to apply our curiosity, our empathy, and passion to redesign education? And with that, I'll say, stay curious, empathize with others, and embrace your passions. Thank you.